What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about 5 Samsung smartphones that you can pick up for around 200 to 250 bucks, and a lot of these phones are still pretty powerful. So let's go ahead and get started with one of my favorite phones on the list, the Galaxy S21 5G. So this is a pretty impressive phone. It kind of got forgotten about. But I think it's a really good bargain these days. It's around like 255 on Amazon right now, and very impressive. So it's got a plastic back, an aluminum frame. A lot of people didn't like that plastic back when it first came out, but it's really not that bad. But it has a IP68 dust and water resistant. Like I said, the aluminum frames makes it feel still premium, and it still has a very premium flagship look in my opinion. So this phone has a 6.2-inch display. It's dynamic AMOLED, HDR10 plus. It gets all the way up to 1300 nits peak brightness, and it's 1080p 421 for the PPI. So it's a very good display with super slim bezels on here. So I'm really impressed with the display on here. Like I said, it looks excellent still. So this phone also is running Android 13. It will get updates for a few years to come, plus security patches, so that's really sweet. It has the Snapdragon AAA processor, and this phone is blazing fast. Now again, my only beef with the AAA processor is that if you're gaming for a long period of time, these phones can kind of get hot and stuff like that. But otherwise, this phone is just a beast when it comes to performance. It basically will play anything you throw at it. So you're going to be just fine performance wise. It has 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. You also have very nice, respectable stereo speakers, great bass quality, very good mids and highs on here as well. And then you also have pretty much all your bells and whistles as far as NFC, Samsung desktop support. The under the display fingerprint sensor is extremely fast. You can take advantage of face unlock and all that good stuff. Where this phone actually really shines is the camera setup. So it's got a 12 megapixel standard, a 64 megapixel telephoto lens. It's got 3x hybrid zoom on here, 1.1 optical zoom, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It also shoots in 8K 24 as well too, and then you have a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. Image quality is fantastic on here. It still takes flagship quality photos and just beautiful colors on here. Great dynamic range, does pretty good in low light, does great with video. It is a awesome phone for this price point. If you're like one of those people that take a lot of photos, you really enjoy the photos on this phone. I think they're still excellent. So the battery life on this phone is also just kind of okay. It's got somewhat of a smaller battery at 4,000 milliamps, 25-watt wired charging, and then it has wireless and reverse wireless charging on here. Basically, this phone can kind of get, like, for me, around like 5. If you use it lightly, kind of gets 6 hours, but definitely the battery life is just sort of okay on this phone. It's not like that crazy. But in general, I think for the price, this is an awesome pickup. Next is the Galaxy S10e. You could pretty much fit any phone, any Galaxy S10 series phone in this list because they're all actually around the $200 price point. It just depends on which size you want, basically. But I like the S10e for people who want like a very compact phone, and believe it or not, this phone is extremely cheap. Last time I saw it, it was like $134, so it's just crazy cheap right now. Basically, you can pick it up as a main phone or a secondary phone as well too. That's how good this phone is still. It's got an aluminum frame. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. Like I said, extremely compact, so it's very easy to one hand, fits in the pocket well. Just really light and small phone. It's got a 5.8-inch display. It's dynamic AMOLED. It's HDR10 plus. It's 1080p 438 for the PPI. It still has a beautiful display on here, beautiful colors. I think the only thing that might seem a little bit dated is probably there's no high refresh rate, but other than that, it's still a beautiful display to look at. It gives off great colors, just looks great doing anything on it. This phone got its last major OS update, Android 12 One UI 4.1, and it's currently getting security patches. It has the Snapdragon 855 on here, and this phone is still blazing fast. I dropped the gaming test. Check out that gaming test, guys. Type it in the search bar. Crazy fast still. It plays games like really good. PUBG, Call of Duty, Fortnite. I played them all. It runs it fantastic. You also have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. And then you have actually a headphone jack on here. So for you guys that are headphone jack lovers, that is still on here. And then you have stereo speakers on here, which sound excellent, especially for the size of this phone. Very loud, very crisp and clear, pretty good bass. And then actually you have all of your basically flagship features that you would find in newer phones. The physical fingerprint scanner is on the side, and I love it. It's absolutely my favorite implementation of a fingerprint sensor. And then you also have Samsung desktop support, NFC, IP68. All the flagship features are pretty much here. This phone's cameras are pretty good still in good lighting. You take it out of good lighting, then it sort of gets like soft. But 12 megapixel standard, 16 megapixel ultra wide, shoots in 4K 60, 10 megapixel selfie, shoots in 4K 60 as well. It takes very good shots, like I said, in good lighting, good dynamic range, pretty good colors on here. Again, take it out of good lighting, images will look a little soft. Here's the thing with this phone. 3100 milliamp battery, 15 watt wire charging, 15 watt wireless charging, and then you have reverse wireless charging as well too. Battery life is not crazy good on this phone. You can squeeze around 4 hours and 30 minutes, which isn't technically a full day. A full day's use for a phone is around 6 hours of screen on time. So this phone, you might have to buy like a battery pack, or like one of those battery cases they sell for extra, like I think they're like 50 bucks. But the phone is so cheap, I think it's worth it. And like I said, if you want something that's super small, compact, this is an absolute beast. All right, guys, next is the Galaxy A52 5G, or you can get the A52s 5G as well too. They're around 200 bucks, and this is a really good phone. This is one of the mid-range phones that I actually do like. If I highly recommend do not get the Galaxy A53. It's terrible. The Exynos chip in there, awful. Every video I've seen of it is awful. I didn't even pick it up this year because I already knew when they made that move. So that's just a little side rant. But yeah, so Galaxy A52, man, this is a pretty sweet mid-ranger. It's a plastic phone, so of course you're not gonna get that super premium flagship feel like the other phones, but it still feels good, still looks good to me. And you also have IP67 dust and water resistant, which I think is pretty sweet as well. This phone actually has a very good display. It's a super AMOLED display. It's 120 hertz HDR10 plus, 800 nits brightness at 6.5 inches. 1080p 407 for the PPI, so it's a pretty nice display, pretty nice bezels on here. Like I said, 120 hertz, so it feels super silky smooth as well too. And this phone will get Android 14 and security patches as well, so it'll be updated for a good while as well too, which is pretty sweet. Why I like this phone over the A53 is that this one actually has the Snapdragon 750G, so the phone is less laggy and it doesn't, this animations are smoother, it games a little bit better. Like I said, mid-range phones, I would highly recommend an older flagship phone on this list if you want to game. But this phone does really good for casual gaming, Subway Surfers, stuff like that. You also have micro SD card support, and you actually have the headphone jack, which they took away with the A53, I believe. So that's another reason why I don't like the phone. But yeah, 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 gigs of RAM. Stereo speakers are on board. They have pretty good bass quality, sound pretty decent. The under the display fingerprint sensor is here. It works really fast. And this phone actually has pretty respectable cameras, 64 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel ultra wide. It even has a macro camera, 5 megapixels, and a depth sensor as well, also 5 megapixels. Shoots in 4K 30 on the front and back with a 32 megapixel selfie. This phone takes some really good shots, I think, for a mid-ranger. You have pretty good dynamic range, pretty good colors on here, pretty good details. So I think overall you'll be really happy with the shots on here. I think battery life is pretty good on this phone. So 4500 milliamp battery, 25 watt wire charging, no wireless charging or anything like that. Basically this phone easily gets around 6 hours of screen on time, so I was really happy with the battery performance on here. And overall I think it's a pretty solid deal. It's 120 hertz, relatively fast, good cameras, good battery, and like I said, super cheap. Alright, so next is the Galaxy S20 Plus. This is a really nice phone. It's around, again, that $200 price point, and I really like the design of this phone, how it feels in the hand. It's aluminum frame, IP68 dust and water resistant. This phone has a beautiful display, super slim bezels, I absolutely love the display design on the S series phones. You have a dynamic AMOLED 120 hertz display, HDR10 plus, 1200 nits peak brightness, so it's super bright outdoors. It's a 1440p display, 525 for the PPI, but the 120 hertz is only available in full HD, so do remember that. But otherwise, it's a very good display, like very pretty to look at. This phone is upgradable to Android 13, and that was the last major OS update, so it is going to get security patches from now on. It does have Snapdragon 865 chip, one of my favorite chips, just a beast when it comes to gaming performance. It just blows the competition away. It's able to play PUBG at really high settings, I believe 90 frames, and pretty much anything you throw at it, it's able to game really well and not get super hot like the Snapdragon 888 and 8 series phones. So I really do like that. Micro SD card support is on board. 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. So you have plenty of storage. And also stereo speakers sound really good on this phone. No headphone jack. NFC is on board. All the, basically the flagship features, fingerprint scanners on here, Samsung desktop support, all that good stuff. This phone actually has pretty good camera as well too. It's a 12 megapixel standard, 16 megapixel 64 megapixel telephoto lens, and then you also have 12 megapixel ultra wide, and then you also have a 0.3 depth sensor. It shoots in 8K24. Image quality is pretty good on this phone, as you would expect from an older flagship. Great detail, it does a really good job with zoom shots. It does 3x hybrid zoom as well too. And yeah, so no complaints with the cameras on here. 10 megapixel selfie, shoots in 4K 60. So overall, I had zero complaints with the image quality. Battery life is also pretty good on here. 4,500 milliamp hour battery, 25-watt charging, wireless and reverse wireless charging. So you do get a full day battery life out of this guy, which is pretty sweet. Alright, so last is the standard Galaxy Note, the smaller version, and this is a really sweet phone. Again, you can find it for around 200 bucks. Got an aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. This phone, you have a built-in stylus, so you can do digital artwork or you can just navigate with the stylus. So that's really nice, and you have all of the extra software features as well too. Got a beautiful design and beautiful display at 6.3 inches. It's dynamic AMOLED. HDR10 plus, 1080p 401 for the PPI. So it's a beautiful display on here as well too. So that's one thing that I think is really sweet with this phone. You also have on here, this phone got its last major OS update, Android 12, One UI 4, and it will be getting security patches. You also have the Snapdragon 855. This is also a phone that is very fast, so when it comes to gaming performance, just doing anything on this phone, very efficient. No SD card support on this guy, 256 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM, so you do have plenty of storage even though you don't have the additional SD card support. And then you have stereo speakers, which work great, very loud, nice and crisp and clear. All the flagship features are pretty much here still. NFC, Samsung desktop support is on here. Like I said, IP68, wireless charging, reverse wireless charging. So all the good stuff is on here. You also have a triple camera setup. It's a 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, 2x optical zoom, and then a 16 megapixel ultra wide. And she's in 4K 60 on the front and back with a 10 megapixel selfie. It takes pretty good shots, good dynamic range, good color, pretty good detail, especially in good lighting. You're going to be really happy with this phone as far as the images go. And the battery life is just kind of okay on this phone, not too crazy. It's 3,500 milliamp hour battery, 25-watt charging. And basically you can kind of get close to 6 hours of screen on time, but not quite. But the battery life is not, bad by any means. So overall, this is a really solid phone. Like I said, if you don't want the bigger Note because it might be too big, this is definitely way more easier to one hand. And I just really like the size of this phone. I think it's pretty nice. So be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.